Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a fascinating and, well, pretty complex slice of history.
Absolutely.
We're focusing on the city of Arad over in the Transylvania Banat region, specifically the interwar years, so 1919 to 1939.
Right after it became part of Romania, a period of huge change.
Exactly. And we've got a lot of material here, official reports, statistics that seem to clash, old newspaper clippings. Our job really is to try and sift through all this and answer a key question for you. After Arad joined Greater Romania, what actually happened to its economy? And for the people living there, did life get better or worse?
It sounds straightforward, that question, but answering it is tricky
Why is that?
because the sources themselves, well, you have to handle them with care. Much of the material we have warns us that the data from this time, whether it's official stats or what you read in the press, was often shaped, intentionally or not, to present a certain picture, not always the full reality.
Okay, so starting with the stats then, you'd normally think of numbers as objective, right?
You would, but apparently not so much here. There's a striking quote from Dr. Kovacs Alahos. He was involved with the Central Statistical Institute. Back in 1928, he essentially said that the Romanian census figures allowed, and this is almost a direct quote, more room for fantasy than for realistic, scientifically based statistical records.
Wow. Fantasy. That's
Yeah.
quite a statement about official numbers.
It tells you something, doesn't it? If the very foundation, the data itself, is potentially skewed, we have to be really critical about any conclusions drawn from it.
So shaky numbers. And what about the press? The written word?
Under constant pressure, you have to remember, Arad's position, it was a border city. That meant intense scrutiny, censorship.
Right.
And this led to some, frankly, bizarre situations, like the case of the journalist Jacob Ageza.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that one.
He wrote this piece, quite sympathetic, about a family split up at the new border. Tragic story.
Okay.
And he gets charged with irredentism, trying to reclaim lost territory.
So we're writing about a separated family.
Because he used the words now and though. His sentence was something like, loving hearts, though separated by borders, have now found each other.
Just for using now and though. That seems incredibly sensitive.
It shows the climate, doesn't it? The intense nationalism, the fear, how everyday language could suddenly become politically explosive.
And this wasn't just about words, was it? There were physical changes too.
Oh, absolutely. It was about reshaping the whole visible landscape. We see this in official documents about cultural friction. Like in 1934, there was this decision to move or even demolish certain statues.
Statues of Hungarian figures.
Yes, like Fabian Gabor's statue. The official reason given was explicit, so they would not offend the national feelings of the Romanian population.
So literally removing parts of the city's past from public view.
It was part of establishing a new narrative, a new identity for the city within Romania, sometimes quite forcefully.
Okay, so keeping all that in mind, the unreliable stats, the censorship, the cultural reshaping, let's try to tackle the economy.
Right. And to do that properly, we need to make a distinction, one that economist Herman Daly really emphasized. It's between economic growth and development.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, growth is basically quantitative, just more stuff being produced, a bigger GDP, that kind of thing.
Got it. More money flowing.
Exactly. But development is qualitative. It's about improving the structure of the economy, raising living standards, health, education, a genuine improvement in quality of life, not just more output.
That makes sense. So looking at the growth part first, the GDP figures for Transylvania and Banat after integration, what do the sources say?
Well, this is where it gets messy immediately. The data is contradictory.
How so?
There's one significant study arguing that these newly annexed regions were actually poorer than the rest of Romania and ended up slowing down the overall national growth.
Really? Slowing it down. How do they measure that across different economies?
They use these complex economic tools, like Gierikami's international dollars. It's a way to try and compare purchasing power and wealth across different places and times, trying to get an apples-to-apples comparison.
Okay, so one study says Transylvania and Banat were a drag on the economy.
But then you have another study by researchers named Good and Ma looking at the same period. And they come to a much more positive conclusion for Transylvania and Banat's performance.
So historians and economists don't even agree on the basic numbers for the region.
Not entirely, no. But what's interesting is, despite the debate about the regional impact, there seems to be broader agreement on the national picture.
Which was?
Pretty sluggish growth for Romania overall. GDP per capita did increase between 1925 and 1938, but only from about 316 to 343 units, whatever metric you use.
There doesn't sound like a boom.
It wasn't. And crucially, that growth rate was slower than countries that had lost the war, like Hungary and Bulgaria. They actually saw a more dynamic recovery in the same period.
Slower than the defeated nations. That's telling.
It really is.
Yeah.
And if we shift from just growth to that idea of development, the quality of life aspect, the picture becomes even clearer.
How do we measure that?
Using something like the Human Development Index, the HDI, it combines income with things like health and education.
Okay.
Well, between the wars, Hungary's HDI went up quite a bit, from 0.230 to 0.298. Romania's also rose, but much slower, from 0.167 to 0.220.
So lagging behind, again, even on the broader measure of well-being.
Exactly. It supports the view you find in a lot of the analysis that Romania's interwar period was something of a missed opportunity economically. It didn't quite capitalize on the potential.
Okay, so that's the big picture, national stagnation, missed opportunities. Let's zoom right into Arad now. How did this play out on the ground?
Well, the local reports certainly echo that sense of struggle, and early on, too.
Before the Great Depression even hit.
Yeah, the Chamber of Commerce report from 1928, this is pre-crash. Remember, it's already using words like poverty, suffering, dissatisfaction.
So businesses were feeling the pinch well before the global crisis.
Definitely. It suggests there were underlying problems in how the local economy was being managed within the new Romanian state.
And what role did the state play in Arad specifically?
It seems quite ambivalent, almost counterproductive sometimes. On one hand, the government did actively support certain sectors.
Like which ones?
Textiles did very well. They got protection from foreign competition, basically a captive market, so profits were high. And there was support for a new sugar factory, too.
Okay, so some winners.
Yes, but then you look at the traditional powerhouses of Arad's economy, and they were neglected, or worse.
Such as?
The banks, for instance. Arad's banks were incredibly strong before the war, ranked third in Hungary in 1910. But under Romanian rule, they faced huge taxes and didn't have enough reserves.
Choking them financially.
Pretty much. And the grain trade, also vital for the region, was hampered by really high tariffs imposed by the CFR.
The state railway.
Yes, the Cazelferat Roman.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Istra.
The big wagon factory. A major employer, right?
Huge. But Astra was hit hard because the CFR, its main customer, often didn't pay its debts and wasn't placing enough state orders.
So the state itself was starving one of its own potential industrial champions.
It looks that way. It wasn't just neglect. It seems like mismanagement or perhaps other priorities were at play.
Which leads us to that Skoda scandal story. That sounds pretty damning.
It's an extraordinary example. Apparently, local factories, including Astra, could produce things like cannon platforms quite cheaply.
Okay, domestic production capacity existed.
Yes. But instead of giving the contracts locally, state officials accepted a deal from Skoda, the foreign company.
And the price difference?
The Skoda deal was reportedly 14 times more expensive.
14 times? That goes beyond inefficiency. That sounds like corruption, or at least a total disregard for local industry.
It certainly suggests that boosting Arad's economy wasn't the top priority for some officials in Bucharest. It points to systemic issues.
And the result for Arad's financial sector. You said the banks were struggling.
The decline was dramatic. Those banks, third in Hungary pre-war, had fallen to 9th place within Romania by World War II.
9th, that's a significant drop.
And they suffered much bigger losses during the economic crisis than banks in nearby cities like Timișoara or Oradea. Arad really lost its position as a key financial center.
A clear economic decline then. Now let's shift to the people, the demography. Was the state trying to change the ethnic makeup of the city too?
There was definitely a strong push in that direction, driven by ideology and specific theories.
Theories.
Yes. For example, Sabin Manuela, who was actually from Arad, was a prominent demographer. In 1929, he put forward this idea.
What was it?
He predicted that the ethnic balance in Transylvanian cities would naturally shift over, say, 60 to 80 years.
How?
Through migration. Basically, Romanian peasants from the surrounding villages would gradually move into the cities, eventually changing the majority population.
Okay, a demographic prediction, but how did the politics react to that?
Not passively. It fueled a much more aggressive approach. The famous historian Nicolae Iorga issued what was basically a proclamation.
Urging what?
Urging Romanian peasants to actively move into cities like Arad. He framed these cities as being dominated by minorities, almost like foreign islands. and called for their rapid Romanianization.
So turning a demographic theory into an active political project.
Exactly. And this wasn't just talk. It translated directly into state policy, especially around jobs.
How so? What does the data show?
A really systematic shift in employment, particularly in state-controlled sectors. Take transport, for instance.
Okay.
In 1910, only about 12% of transport workers in the area were Romanian. By 1930, they were the majority, over 4,400 out of about 7,100.
That's a massive change in just 20 years.
Huge. And public services, even more dramatic. Romanians went from 11% of employees pre-war to 70% by 1930.
So the state was very effectively using its power as an employer to change the city's workforce makeup.
Clearly. But, and this is crucial, it wasn't a total transformation across the board.
Where did minorities hold on?
Primarily in the private sector. In 1930, if you look at trade, credit, banking, the financial heart of the private economy, minorities were still dominant.
What were the numbers there?
Around 32% of employees in those sectors were Jewish, and nearly 40% were Hungarian.
Interesting. So state jobs became heavily Romanian, but private finance and trade remained largely in minority hands.
Which brings us back to the census, specifically the contentious 1931.
Right. You mentioned the stats were debated. What was the issue here?
It revolved around how ethnicity was recorded. The Romanian authorities preferred to ask about nationality.
Okay.
But minority groups, especially Hungarians, argued that mother tongue was a more accurate reflection of identity in a multilingual region.
And what difference did it make which question was asked?
A big difference in Arad's case. If you went by mother tongue, Hungarians actually still formed the absolute majority in the city in 1930.
Still the majority. How?
Because significant numbers of people who might have been recorded as Jewish or German by nationality actually declared Hungarian as their mother tongue. They were culturally majorized.
So despite all the state efforts in employment and pushing the nationality definition, using mother tongue showed the Hungarian cultural influence was still incredibly strong.
Exactly. It shows the limits of those assimilation policies, especially in the private and cultural spheres.
So let's try and tie this together. We have a struggling economy, political friction, demographic shifts. What was daily life actually like? Did people feel poorer?
Well, we have some fascinating budget data from the 1930s for a typical middle-class family in Arad, a family of 5.
Okay, what does it show?
It shows they were spending nearly 40%, 39.45% to be exact, of their monthly income just on food.
40% on food. How does that compare?
It's really high. For comparison, a similar family in Norway at the time spent maybe 32%, and in the UK it was only about 26.5%.
Wow. So nearly double the proportion compared to the UK. That suggests life was much more about basic subsistence, even for the middle class. Less disposable income.
Definitely a tighter budget. And rent was another huge chunk, almost 23% of their income. Food and rent alone ate up over 60% of the budget.
That paints a picture of a fairly precarious existence.
It does. Economically, things seem tougher. But it's not all negative. Arad wasn't falling behind in every respect.
Oh, in what ways was it modernizing?
Infrastructure, for one. They were actually quite advanced with electricity. Arad County had electric lighting in almost 38% of households, which was way above the national average of about 24%.
Ahead of the curve there.
And even more remarkably, Arad installed an automatic telephone exchange in 1937.
Automatic exchange? That sounds quite modern for the 30s.
It was. They got it before Bucharest, the capital city.
So pockets of real modernity alongside the economic struggles. What about communications, like radio?
Radio spread quickly, too. Arad County had a pretty high density of radio sets, about 23 per 1,000 people.
People were tuning in.
They were. But, just like the press, technology ran into politics. The authorities actually banned the sale of cheap crystal radios.
Banned cheap radios? Why on earth would they do that?
Because those simple radios had a short range. They could easily pick up the powerful signal from Budapest radio.
Ah, the provocative Hungarian station?
Exactly. But they often couldn't reliably receive the weaker, more distant signal from Bucharest radio, the official state broadcaster.
So they banned the tech because it tuned into the wrong station too easily. Control again.
It's a perfect example of the tension.
Yeah.
Embracing new technology, but only when it served the state's narrative.
Yet, despite all this control, this friction, you mentioned earlier, there were still moments of connection, coexistence.
Yes, the sources do point to that. Little acts of defiance or just, people getting along.
Like what?
There's an incident in 1930 where the head of the Arad Council, the Tefan Ciccio Pop, openly defied an order from the interior minister. He continued reading out council decisions in Hungarian and German, as well as Romanian, sticking to local multilingual tradition despite pressure from the center.
A small act, but significant.
And then you get these lively little snippets, like a report from New Year's Eve in 1936, mentioning Romanians joining in and dancing the Hungarian sardas.
So everyday life could sometimes bridge those political divides.
It seemed so. Away from the official pronouncements and policies, people found ways to coexist.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. Bringing our deep dive on interwar air to a close, what's the bottom line?
Well, it seems clear Arad experienced slower growth, maybe even stagnation, compared to its potential and its pre-war dynamism. Answering your initial question, did people live better or worse? The economic data, like that family budget, leans towards worse, or at least significantly more precarious.
And the reasons seem to be largely external. Centralization, mismanagement.
It points strongly in that direction. The city felt squeezed between its rivals Timisoara and Oradea, and suffered from that excessive centralization, the inefficiency, and maybe corruption, like that Skoda deal shows. The failure to support key local industries like Astray and the banks seems critical.
But at the same time, the effort to Romanianize the city, while successful in state jobs, wasn't total.
No. The minority communities, particularly the Hungarians, were clearly weakened in terms of political power and public sector presence. But they managed to hold on to their core pillars, their cultural institutions, and crucially their economic influence in the private sector, trade, and finance.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, our listener, to ponder.
Considering everything the state threw at it,
Mhm.
the employment policies, the political pressure, laws like the national labor law designed specifically to boost the Romanian presence in cities. Why? Why did the Hungarian community in Arad, even as its numbers slightly declined, manage to maintain such a strong cultural identity and private economic base right through this difficult period?
How successful really were those top-down assimilation efforts when faced with the resilience of community structures and private enterprise? Something to think about.